Good morning. We up? Excellent. Thank you all for coming again. Welcome to day 2. This isn't quite the 10th year we've been here, but it's 10 years since the first one we had here in 2009. So I guess that marks some sort of anniversary. So welcome back to Chesapeake Beach again for day 2. It's probably also the 20 years since I did the first one of these myself. But if I talk to Tu Vu and Richard Fleeson, who are hiding somewhere, as far as I can tell, this conference started back in the late 70s or mid 80s as the BBTB conference. So it's been going on for quite some time. And I'm still trying to find out the history of when we actually first started these. And there you go. Okay, oh, it's a shotgun. I should pay attention. So great to have you all here this morning. Did you have a good time last night? Excellent. Good. Okay. So, this is the only conference you can probably go to where we start with a rainbow, and we give you a rainbow to begin with, and we finish by giving you crabs. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the wrong side. Well, there might be a few there, but no, we'll have crabs later. Yes. Sorry, I got my slides out of order. Didn't mean to do that. Yeah, right, exactly. And obviously, this conference wouldn't be possible without a lot of other people who help us. First off, all the managers and SMPTE people who are involved, raise your hand in the room so we can see you all. Look at, so all the people who help make this work, especially I want to, thank you. I especially want to acknowledge Rick Singer down in front here, who's been on my right hand and really ran with it this year and done a lot of great work. And it's one of the wonderful things about this conference is not only helping all of you understand the technology and where we're going and kind of bringing what's happening at HPA and the SMPTE Advanced Technology Conference and other events to you here, so you don't have to travel across the globe to find these things out, but also helping our own team grow as well. And so, Rick, I'm really impressed to see how much you've taken on and how much you've figured out how all this actually works and made it work, and what a great conference we have this year. So thank you for everything. It's really nice to see it come together. And I couldn't do that without thanking also all the presenters who come to us with our presentation, and we say, thank you, that's really nice, but this is what we really want you to talk about. And they adapt and make their presentation work for us. I think that's what makes this conference work really well, too, is how much they have partnered with us to really make the right set of slides and presentations to put this together. We also couldn't do this without our sponsors. So if you're a sponsor, raise your hand, please. Yes, we have a lot of sponsors here. To give you an idea of how great our sponsors are, because I know these things because of my work with SMPTE, we raise more for this conference than any other section conference in the world. So you guys, your generosity is outstanding. In the past, I'll let you know, we struggled to raise enough money to produce this conference, and then every time we get a little bit more and you guys are a little more generous, the conference gets a little better. We go from having, frozen fish to crab cakes for dinner and stuff, and make it a little more fun to be here and things, and it gets a little better. And so we've actually started to run a slight surplus. And so what we've done with that is said, how do we really benefit our community and the industry with that? And so back in March, we had an event called Media Forward, which was an all-day event to try to bring students, high school and college students and graduate students, into the industry. And it was a chance to really get them excited because, for a lot of us here, especially those with gray hair or lacking hair, the television was the place to be growing up. It was cool. It was a hot thing. And now, of course, there's all those other technology industries. So we really wanted to attract that next generation to the industry, make sure that they're seeing television and media as an exciting place to be. So we had this event, and we had 80-some people register. We didn't get quite that strong a turnout because it turned out it was the same day as the march in Washington against guns. Perfect timing. We always have these timings. Like this week is also, we're exactly the same 2 days as the ATSC conference in Washington. So these things happen. People don't pay attention to us enough, obviously. They should have known better than to have their march the same day as our Media Forward event. But, what can I say? So we had this event, and I just want to show you a picture that Jay took of part of the audience. If we want to change our industry and become more inclusive and really reach out to another generation, excluding this guy here, that just shows this is where you begin. This is where you really find the next generation and make sure it's represents the entire society and our community. So this was a great event, and I really thank you all, because if it weren't for the sponsors, we could not afford to do this. Nobody actually ponies up money to sponsor events for students, really, because they don't buy a lot of equipment. So, so this is a chance for us to give back. And so to the sponsors, thank you. This is one of the good things you've done for the community you probably didn't even realize until now, so thank you. Having said that, on to our program for today. So we put this program together as we start looking at the presentations coming in and what's going on in the industry and what people are talking about and what the challenges are. And yesterday was really about 2110 and HDR and making it work, because we've been talking about that year after year. And now we're actually building facilities, so we move the 2110 from the Thursday deck into the Wednesday deck, because now people are actually implementing it, and we want to give you guys the tools and knowledge to know about what it takes to make it work. And today we're talking about the media supply chain. So this is maybe a new concept to a lot of you, and Nick's going to give you an introduction. But it really is a chance to transform our industry, and we'll have people talking about what they've done here to make this work. The cloud is changing everything, especially on the file-based side of the workflows in the media supply chain, creating a much more connected community of people. And if you look at our industry, what you really see is that in the past, we built these very complex, big, technical-heavy systems that sat between the creators and the consumers of content. We built these things, where we had people manning the air compressors on the tape machines back in the early days, on the quad machines, to, having to manually roll two machines. We got some automation there. We do all these things to keep improving it, but we still have these very complicated systems. But now we're moving towards this media supply chain where the speed and the connectivity between the creator and the consumer is getting closer and faster, where content is being created and delivered in days instead of years from one end to the other, and where we're actually changing the way this is being consumed as well. And it's going to really change how we do a lot of things. So this is a chance to understand some of the foundations, how the cloud works, a great case study on discovery and what they've really pioneered in this industry, looking at how people do different things. And finally, we're going to end up, after you learn the basics and seen some implementations and seen how some of this works, look at artificial intelligence and how that's really changing what we're doing and how the cloud and the media supply chain makes this possible. And how, and I was talking to someone the other day who said, archives, yeah, that's where assets go to die, I think. Sorry, James, where are you? Hey, right,
Live forever.
Yeah, or die forever. Yeah, exactly. And through AI, there's a chance to go in there and take all your archives and add valuable metadata and be able to actually finally use them again without having to manually do that, to bring value to something that's sitting there all these years that you've been preserving but never actually could repurpose. So I look forward to our presentations. And Nick, I'm going to hand it off to you. Before I do that, late checkout. The hotel is 3/4 full tonight, so there's a limited number of people who can check out late. If you want to check out late, tell the front desk, but I can't promise you a late checkout. So there we go. And any other housekeeping notes before we get going? Good?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Carl?
My wife Susan is
Oh.
a swiper, and if you'd like to renew your SMPTE membership, you can do that through the time. If you're not a SMPTE member, you can take care of that right here. Have your credit card ready.
And before we stop on that note, let's give a hand for Susan Kuhn, who volunteers and manages registration desk every year. Thank you, Susan. We couldn't do this without you, and this is fantastic. Nick, I'm going to leave this to you. And cue you up, and you are right here.
Oh, there's a clicker.
There's a clicker and even a laser pointer.
Ooh.
Don't kill him.
Good morning, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. Before I get into the presentation, I have a weird question. Did anyone else's television turn on in the middle of the night last night? I'm glad it's not just a ghost in my room, because it woke me up and kind of weirded me out. The remote wasn't anywhere near me, so I thought it might be a television engineer messing with me too. So I'm Nick Gold with Chesapeake Systems. I'm just going to take a couple minutes this morning to kind of give you my vision of the content supply chain, media supply chain. One of our vendors who's always trying to grasp for a new way of describing this concept has called it the content utility grid or content inventory management. And, you know, what are people trying to get at here? And one of the interesting, I used content in my slides, as you can see, but again, some people use content or media. And, you know, supply chain is an interesting, you know, metaphor for what this has evolved into now, because a chain is like a very linear thing. And it also breaks if, you know, one link breaks. And that's actually not at all what the media or content supply chain has kind of shaped up to be and what's emerging. So, you know, do I love it as a piece of jargon? You know, jargon has its purpose. It's a way of, you know, casting shorthand on a very complex, sometimes, set of concepts. And this is emerging to be pretty complex stuff. So, you know, the question is, what is the content supply chain? And if the reality is, or media, and I'll probably use the word media as I'm stepping through here. What is it? And, you know, it kind of connotes, I think, you know, you got this. Then there's a lot of this going on. And then, yay, happy family watching TV. And, you know, the meat grinder is obviously kind of what we're focusing on today with the program. And again, everyone's kind of, you know, special ingredients in the meat grinder are different. You might use a different vendor than someone else or have a completely different set of workflows. Your pieces of your media supply chain might be very different than the person sitting next to you. In fact, I can pretty much guarantee it is. So when thinking about what is this media supply chain and what's a good way of envisioning it, visualizing it? Again, television production, it was very interesting yesterday hearing Larry comment on the advent of recording, something I've taken for granted in my professional life in the media industry. But it was really a live production chain. In fact, it kind of did look like the meat grinder, you know, workflow, but actually a little more basic. And I think about things that I'm familiar with and, you know, concepts or metaphors that work well to envision what this is shaping up to be. And the one that I kind of come back to is this, which is the stack. The stack. And, you know, we like stacks. Stacks are useful. Stacks are also, I think, a good way of thinking through these types of complex system arrangements. We obviously have networking and other protocol stacks. And again, we kind of have come to understand what a stack operating in this way means. Software design these days is typically a stack. You know, this is a diagram of some random software platform. I don't actually even know what it is. And, you know, it's describing a bunch of microservices and subcomponents of a, you know, software application suite. So I like this notion of stacks for thinking through what this media supply chain is. And so the media stack is a lot of things. We obviously have, as we talked about extensively yesterday, production signals have now become production streams, as well as production files and production metadata. That's where it obviously all begins. Obviously, things then from there go into post-production with a new set of files, a new set of additional metadata, proxies that are generated for the purpose of post-production tasks. They could be intermediaries, they could be viewing proxies, what have you. And this is an important one to keep, I think, our focus on, is that there are human processes associated with the media supply chain. Post-production processes, collaboration processes. It's not a fully digital system. We have us sacks of meat also involved with the supply chain. Obviously, again, you know, review and approval, collaboration, just typical post-production tasks. It's not, you know, you can do a lot with Telestream's post-producer to automate certain kind of things. You can't really automate purely narrative storytelling, at least yet. We then obviously have a lot of delivery files, and this is where packaging comes in, and delivery metadata, whether that's delivered via, you know, JSON, getting shot over to someone via an API call, or an XML sidecar file, or yes, a lot of folks are still using, you know, comma delimited or tab delimited, you know, files to pass metadata between systems. I'm a big believer that, at this point, it's not all in the cloud yet. So our media supply chain, of course, continues to include on-premises systems, especially, again, on post-production where, people might be manipulating very large files. Not a lot of people doing kind of remote post-production activities or cloud-based post-production, although this too is emerging. Obviously, as Peter said, the cloud is enabling a lot in the way of what this contemporary media supply chain is evolving into. I don't think I mentioned it in the slide specifically, but AI services, machine learning services, whether these are for visual recognition, person recognition, speech to text, what have you. There are literally dozens of such types of services that you can call on. The event sponsor Veritone is obviously an example of one of these folks. And that's all a set of processes and additional metadata that's created as part of this overall media supply chain. You've got your MAMs, DAMs, PAMs. I'm sure people will come up with other AMs soon enough. In fact, I've actually heard some recently. These are obviously a big part of it. And again, that vendor I alluded to, comes up with their own way of describing these things like content utility grid. I mean, they're kind of a MAM and a workflow automation vendor. But they're always trying to find their own way of describing what they do. Obviously, transcode, quality control, workflow automation, and as we talked about a bit last year, looking at a lot of this from a service-oriented architecture approach and using technologies maybe like enterprise service bus or business process management systems. We've got obviously still people do watch TV, and we've got playout servers, traffic and automation systems, and then of course for the OTT side and online, we've got CMSs, CDNs, video players. And there's probably a whole bunch of things that you guys can think of right now that are part of your own media supply chains that I haven't even alluded to here. And I've covered quite a bit of ground over all of these areas. So again, when I say this is kind of a complex thing, it's about as non-linear in some ways, as you can be from a chain. So what I think of, and I think it's a good way of thinking about, again, where the people presenting today, where they fit into this, I think of a state machine. Because again, other than the human processes for those collaborative or post-production tasks, the system is largely digital. It's computable. And if you think about what a state machine is, you can kind of start to see the totality of your media supply chain as this big multi-layered stack of a state machine that's bouncing things between on-premises systems and files and streams and the cloud and various metadata sources and automations that are being powered by metadata and automated deliveries and the packaging that needs to take place. And again, I just picture, a state machine and all these little things flipping in a very calculable kind of way. And I think that's one of the things that's really exciting about what's shaping up with this very digital, media supply chain. It is quite predictable. Again, it's largely comprised of computer systems, digital systems. It's very knowable. It can be set up to do a certain thing, and if it's all working properly or wired up properly, it's going to be pretty, replicable at doing that stuff. So I do think a state machine is sort of a way that we can visualize this, but built out of a solution stack of various types of on-premise and cloud-based, products, services, vendors, workflows, automations, what have you. So, the content supply chain, media supply chain, it is this very digital thing. There is no one vendor who has the solution to it. It's a solution, again, a stack that you're going to have to build for your organization in a way that makes sense for your needs, your workflows. It's going to be changing a lot all of the time. I know of really no client that I work with, and probably none that I can think of, that in this day and age have a very static set of workflows and kind of supply chain logistics. It's, there's some new device, and so there's a new encoding format, or there's a whole new codec, or people want metadata in this format now, or we have to deliver to these new guys and they have another API that we need to write to. So it's constantly evolving, but again, the nice thing about digital technology and a lot of this stack being software-based is we can manipulate it when we need to. If you take the right approach, again, I'll beat the drum of really thinking about it in terms of services-oriented kind of architecture and building kind of a hub that you can then rewire pieces of on the fly and build the new workflows that you need as new requirements get handed off to you. that, is going to be a useful way of looking at it. And again, think of it as the stack that forms a big old state machine. And I think that's as close as I've come to kind of wrapping my head around it. And hopefully I will be closer after the end of today, and I hope you guys will as well. So I think with that, I'm ready to hand it off to the first official speaker.
There you go.